college football is rapidly changing and advancing in a number of different ways. NIL, transfer portal, coaching is changing a lot right now. If you're not familiar with what's going on, there are teams hiring coordinators. Ohio State's the one that's doing it the most right now, hiring coordinators who are not countable like recruiting coaches. And that's a huge expense. For the longest time in college football, your coordinators have also been position coaches who had to go out and recruit. But now, with college football trying to get better coaches from the NFL or wherever else it might be and trying to hold on to their coaches because they recognize how good, how important coaches are nowadays. Go look at the raises that Indiana gave to Bryant Haynes and Mike Shanahan, completely deserved, by the way. But you look at that kind of stuff, like coaches, not just head coaches, are making more now at some places than they have ever made before, including the playoffs are changing as well. Now, the playoffs are going to stay at 12 teams this year, but there's a whole lot of talk about that changing. It took like 12 years for the playoffs to go from 4 teams to 12 teams. It might take 2 or 3 years for it to go from 12 teams to 16 teams or 24 teams, because that's how much things are changing. That's how quickly things are going on. And if we're being honest, the more things change, the more expensive everything gets. And right now in college football, for conferences like the ACC in the Big 12, it's not good that things get more expensive, because college programs are suddenly having to pay more for all those things, coaching and everything else that I just mentioned. And every program now has a $20.5 million yearly expense that they have to put out there for revenue sharing. Now, do they have to? No, not necessarily. And I get it. There's some talk out there about how revenue sharing doesn't actually matter and teams are going to go buy it and everything else. And for the most part, teams do. But there is also an expectation out there that if you're not spending, this $20.5 million on your sports, then you don't actually care about your sports. And for many Power 4 budgets, it was like if you had to all of a sudden just randomly add a second mortgage to your budget, right? Your financial budget for your family, just for yourself, whoever it might be. Somebody just gave you a second home and was like, here's your second home. And also you have a mortgage on it as well. Here's a 30-year mortgage, like who could afford that just randomly? Well, the Big Ten has some schools that can afford that just randomly. Ohio State, Michigan, other schools, can afford it, but they had to do some maneuvering to make that happen. Minnesota, obviously Rutgers, we just talked about them and their deficit, UCLA, right? But all these teams want to compete. So they say, well, we're going to pay up. We're going to make it happen. But a report by Christopher Lambert came out this weekend. He's a Big 12 guy, talking about how half the teams in the Big 12 and the ACC cannot afford the $20.5 million budget for revenue sharing, or budget, the expense for revenue sharing. They cannot afford it. It's not that they can't allocate, that they won't allocate the money there for it or anything else. They can't afford it. And if you listen to all the experts talking about this, if you listen to athletic directors talking about this, this is only going to continue to grow. Next year, it probably won't be $20.5 million. It could get up to 22, 23, $24.5 million next year, because that's what's going to keep happening to this. And you even have some athletic directors like Ross Bjork of Ohio State, and I think the Miami athletic director, I forget what his name is, he came out and said it too. Like, we don't want the cap, because at the end of the day, the cap, everybody just goes away from it anyway, right? And so for a lot of people, a lot of these bigger programs, they just want to get rid of it. It's just a hindrance to them because they want to spend more, but other programs, half of the ACC and the Big 12, can't even afford the 20.5 right away. And so you're seeing programs in the SEC, programs in the Big 10, either meet this, not say no problem, but meet this, willingly meet it, or others that just say, well, we just want to completely skyrocket above this because it's not indicative of the type of talent we want to bring in, because we want our team to be that much better, right? And it's actually capping how much some of these players can make. And so at the end of the day, revenue sharing is expected to grow every year, like I talked about. It's expecting to just keep getting higher and higher and higher. And it's further proof that the Big Ten and the SEC will eventually break away and have their own kind of pseudo league, whatever else it might be. And we've talked about this forever. The SEC speaks and the Big Ten acts, right? The SEC has been speaking about this for a while. Well, what if we just broke away and did our own thing? What if we just broke away and played ourselves, played our own thing, did our own thing? What if we just did that? Right? You're not hearing that from the Big Ten, but what are you seeing from the Big Ten? We just talked about in the last segment. Insulating themselves, playing 10 playoff games, right? Trying to say we're going to stick within ourselves. And as much as, yes, they don't get along, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the Big Ten and the SEC to like combine and work together right now because they can't agree on anything and they're like mortal enemies. I think both of those two conferences realize that they need each other, right? As much as probably, the Big Ten has the national footprint, they also need some of the viewership that the SEC gets because of ESPN and everything else. As much as the ESPN doesn't have the national footprint, right? They have the viewership, but they also need that national footprint and exposure that the Big Ten can get them. Otherwise, they just turn into something that only people from the South watch. And it's not something that all of the country loves with college football like they do now, right? Excluding a few states that are kind of like FCS centralized kind of stuff. But this is going to change the future of college football if the revenue sharing continues to grow and other conferences, other teams are not able to stick with it, because eventually they would just become irrelevant. And it's only going to continue to frustrate teams in the ACC that do want to compete, that do want to have be spending this kind of money, like Miami, who doesn't even want the cap because they just want to blow right on by it because they have the money to do that, right? And the Big Ten and the SEC are looking at those programs and saying, we want to go after those programs and bring them into our conference, because if they stick around in the ACC, if they stick around in the Big 12, they don't have the payout to be able to do this. But you can bring in a North Carolina, you could bring in a Duke, you could bring in a Clemson, a Virginia, a Miami, right? North Carolina is like the main school right now that all the conferences want. The Big 12 is not going to get them because they don't offer enough. But the Big 10 and the SEC desperately want North Carolina to join their conference because of the population boom and everything that's going there right now. Clemson is in a similar boat, right? Duke is in a similar way as well. Virginia is being desired by the Big 10 and the SEC a lot. Miami, as much as Miami does kind of seem to be a little troublesome sometimes with maybe they don't want to always follow the rules, they are a program that shows they want to compete. Now, programs like Texas Tech and stuff like that, don't want to sign the CSC agreement and stuff like that, sounds like other programs and conferences might not be as adept to bringing them in. But at the same time, you have schools like Ole Miss and LSU and Alabama who tamper like crazy, and the SEC still keeps them there. But that's creating a rift in the SEC right now too, because you have the Georgia athletic director coming out and saying, we got to do something about these schools because it's not fair that these schools are not, he's not naming anybody by name, but you know who he's talking about. Ole Miss, LSU, Alabama. You know what he's talking about. It's not fair that they can go out there and they can tamper like this. And meanwhile, we have to sit here and not do anything. And right now, that's kind of what's holding Georgia back in a whole lot of ways. Is Georgia is actually trying to comply with a lot of these rules. And I know a lot of people will say, well, Georgia can't even comply with road rules and all this stuff. Yeah, that's true. But the school is trying to comply with a lot of this house settlement stuff. Whether it's stupid or not, that's what they're trying to do. And so they get frustrated when they see other programs not complying because they say, this is what we wanted. And the SEC is not doing anything about it. Greg Sankey is starting to take more heat than he ever has in his career before. Pat Forty wrote an article on it. There's been more people talking about it openly, more freely than they ever have before. The 9-game conference schedule in the SEC, nobody in the SEC is happy with that. Coaches hate that, right? Now, I think there's a couple. I think the media days last year, it might have been Drinkwitz maybe was one. Or no, it was Brian Kelly. Well, he's gone. So that was your one ally there, Sankey. He was kind of for it, but these other coaches aren't, because they think the SEC is just so big and bad and everything that it's going to hurt them to play all these conference games. And so what you're seeing right now is you're seeing a huge fracture in the SEC. And yeah, the Big Ten's got their fracture too, right? Michigan and USC, they don't like the public capital deal, UC investments. Sure, there's that. I think Greg Pflugar was the one that kind of coined that term, the Big Ten fracture or whatever. But it's true in this. There are cracks in the foundation with Greg Sankey in the SEC as well, because he's making decisions right now that they don't like, and the brand is taking a hit of the SEC. And certain schools are not going to be, looked upon as coming in because, well, they don't follow the rules, but at the same time, the SEC looks like a bunch of hypocrites because they're not following the rules either. So really the biggest question in all of this is like the ACC, they will basically integrate into the group of 6, kind of like the Pac-12 has done. That's what's eventually is going to happen. Probably around 2029, 2030, 2031. That's when the buyout's going to get low enough that some of these teams are going to start to afford the buyout, and that's when the Big Ten is probably going to get more aggressive with trying to bring some teams in because that's when their TV contract ends, and they're going to go to Fox and NBC and CBS and say, how much you give us if we bring in North Carolina? How much you give us if you bring in Clemson, right? Miami, Florida State, whoever it might be, right? How much are you going to give us? Who should we go after? And is it worth it for us to help pay the buyout to get them out of the ACC? And so that's what's going to happen to the ACC at some point. The Big 12, they're kind of still up in the air, to be honest. We don't know exactly what is going to happen to the Big 12 because the Big 12 does have good competition and good parity, and they actually have pretty good TV numbers, and the basketball is not bad, right? I mean, the Big 12 arguably has the best basketball conference this season. I think the Big 12 or the Big 10 gives them a run for their money. But the Big 12, it's been excellent this year. They have a lot of good teams there. They just had UCF upset Texas Tech. I think that was yesterday. Good parity in that conference on both the football field and the basketball court as well. So it's interesting what's going to happen there. If Texas Tech and BYU, they start to be national championship contenders, do they stick around? Do they help the brand of the Big 12? Does it start getting better? And do they kind of align themselves to be in a little bit of this race with the Big 10 and the SEC? Because they have to have they have to have, number one, the competition. Number two, they have to have the national success. Because like the SEC, they don't have the geographical, floor of their TV ratings, their media markets and stuff like that to be able to not be championship contenders. They need probably 2 or 3 championship contenders in that conference, which makes it more difficult for them because some of them are also in the South, which makes it hard for them. But a team like Texas Tech is a team that has money to do it. And a team like BYU is a team out west that, a lot of people are kind of flocking to the Utah area. And they also kind of have an advantage if they bring in, Mormons and stuff. They come in a little bit older. And as we know, more experience, older definitely helps on certain areas of college football right now. So it's very interesting with the Big 12 and what's going to happen. I think we know what's going to happen with the ACC at this point. I think our next step is probably see what happens with conference expansion. And that's not going to come for probably another 2 or 3 years. We'll probably hear rumors about it, but I think that's probably our most likely stuff. So let's see what you guys are saying here in the chat. Uncle Philip says the Big 12 has been trying to make proactive moves, just lacks the brands. Yes. Yeah. They don't have the brand power. And I think if they get more contenders, the brand power will increase. But yeah, you're exactly right, Philip. Let's see who else is in here. Sorry guys, I'm trying to be here in the chat with you guys because I like to hear what you guys have to say. You guys are talking about the Constitution now. I'm not getting into political talk. Hoosier Dave says if Indiana can do it, then pretty much anyone can if the stars align. Well, and that's the thing, right? I think any program can do it, but not every program is going to find a Kirk Cinetti, right? Do it is find a Kirk Cinetti. But I don't think Kirk Cinetti should just walk around out there like crazy. I think just about any program can have a one kind of magical season and put it together, but I don't think every program can go out and find a Kirk Cinetti who isn't just going to affect one season. He's going to come in, have success right away, build a brand. And right now, Indiana is one of the largest brands in college football because of their most recent success, the national championship and everything else, right? So that's one of the biggest things with it. All right. Talking about losing the strength and conditioning coach to Tennessee. Yeah. I don't think Cignetti loses anybody unless he's okay with it. That's just me. I don't think Cignetti loses anybody because it doesn't sound like Cignetti's hurting for money right now. But maybe he is because they paid those coordinators, but that's also the most money Tennessee was ever going to pay I think that's the most money they've ever paid a strength and conditioning coach. And I'm sure at some point Signetti's like, okay, you have to take that, right? We'll find somebody else. And Signetti, with how long he's been around, I'm confident he has a ton of connections. I haven't seen who they hired next. I'll have to go look at that. But I'll have to see. Max says, who is replacing Aaron Henry? Yeah, the Aaron Henry stuff. Illinois losing him. Rob Disher, the special teams coordinator as well. I think Justin Wilcox should replace Aaron Henry. If I'm Brett Bielema, that's the first call I make. Old Cal coach, good defensive coordinator. That's the first call I make. Bring in Justin Wilcox. So, Hoosier Dave said there's probably 3 or 4 Signettis out there. They just ain't been found yet. Yeah, everybody wants Bob Chesney to be the next Signetti. We'll see.